items related to that. My guest will be Sidra Naeem, who joins us in the studio now. Charlie, before you go on to your next story, I think you...
Yeah, it was just a curious question, which is this year during Ramadan we had a bit of a heat wave, and the transport network was urging everybody to carry water with them, and schools were saying kids should be carrying water to school and so on. So what is the situation if in the middle of Ramadan you have public health notices which are saying that people should be drinking all day?
Yeah. Okay, first of all, you don't need to fast if you're young children under puberty, if you're old, or if you've got any health conditions, you do not need to fast. When it comes to water, we drink plenty early in the morning, breakfast time, and we drink plenty when we open our fast. And if they can do it in the Middle East, which is really hot, then we can do it here. And I think that's part of the test, because by not having water, you really understand how the poor feel, which is its purpose. You can splash water on your head and things like that. That sort of cools you down. And like I said, it's supposed to be for young, fit adults, not for children anyway. They don't have to fast, or the elderly who are more likely to feel more thirst.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'm going to ask Sidra a lot more questions like that coming up in hour 2 of the show. We better wrap this hour, though, and say thanks, Sidra. We'll be with you in hour 2 of the programme. So in hour 2, my guest, Sidra Naeem, we're talking about all things Islam. Right here on your truly local station. It's our local radio. It comes from the heart of Eastgate. It's on 97.8 FM and all the W's Gateway 978.com. I'm with Roz, Gateway for a Thursday as we head into the evening. My guest in hour 2 and probably hour 3 of the show as well, because we have such a lovely time when we talk, is Sidra Naeem. And perhaps you'd like to introduce yourself once again to the listeners, because you wear a number of different hats, don't you?
Yes, by profession I'm a teacher, and I work in a Church of England school in Brentwood, which is where I live. And then in my spare time, because that's part-time, I work 3 days a week. On my other 2 days, I am part of 2, maybe 3 interfaith forums now in Essex and Havering. I'm also an Islamic advisor for Essex Police and Havering Police, and I'm also an advisor for all schools, all primary schools, secondary schools, colleges.
So it's all schools Essex, isn't it called?
Yes.
That's what it's called, yes.
I'm part of SACRE, which stands for Standing Advisory Council of Religious Education. And what that committee does is it sets the curriculum for religious education in schools, and I'm the Islamic representative on there. So I've got lots and lots of hats. I'm a Muslim chaplain as well at Chelmsford College. So I've got lots and lots of roles, and they've all come to me. I've never ever gone out and looked for anything. It's really interesting how one role starts and then the next and then the next.
Well, you make contacts. It's called networking, isn't it? And I think you get known for doing good work in the community. And I mean, in particular, with some of the subjects we've talked about with the terrorism and the Islamophobia and that, you're the person in the area to talk to when people want advice on how to tackle these issues. Yes. Have there been any issues recently that you've had to deal with when in your travelling around? The advice you give, say with Essex Police, if we talk just generally here, what are the latest things you've been involved with?
It's been quite quiet because of the summer holidays, so schools have been shut, so there's been nothing happening in the schools. 9/11 obviously happened just over the weekend.
And we've got to say to the listeners, you've just come back from the United States as well, haven't you?
I have, and I've got lots and lots to tell you about that. But because of 9/11, we have had 2 massive open days in the mosques. One in Chelmsford Mosque, where all the reverends were invited, the whole Interfaith Forum was invited, all of SACRE, the committee that I'm part of came. So we've had really good input there. And
what happens there?
What we do is we do a talk on Islam, and we dispel any of the myths that lead to Islamophobia, which I did myself, question and answer session from the audience.
And what's some of those myths that you come across?
Lots of myths. Are women oppressed? Are Muslims terrorists? Do Muslim women work? Are they educated? Are they allowed to go to school? Nasty myths, which are myths, basically. So basically dispel all the myths, showed them around the mosque, made them feel at home, gave them food, lots of food. And they really, really appreciated it. The one in Romford Mosque, there were two lovely ladies there from the local church. They actually wrote into the newspaper, and that's never happened before. A lovely article.
I saw you sent some of the pictures from the Romford one, from the Romford event, so it was a success. The people asking the questions, I have to ask this, are they usual sort of like general white people, or are they all sorts of mixture?
The Romford one, actually, I'd say we had Sikhs, Hindus and Christians and Jews as well. With the Chelmsford one, I would say it was mainly Christians who came. But I think that's because Romford is a more diverse area.
I was going to say, the demographic is very different, isn't it, from area to area?
Yes. So we had teachers, reverends, we had police officers coming as well. At both events, we had a good mix of professionals. So they all had different questions. The police had his own, take on, had their own questions that they wanted to ask. And with Chelmsford Mosque, I was there till 9:30 at night. It just wouldn't finish. We were supposed to finish, late in the evening, and we carried on.
So there was a lot of interest there then, really?
Huge interest. And afterwards we got emails to thank us as well. I think whichever occasion like this happens, an event, it leads then to other events. So then I get called into the churches. For example, with Romford Mosque, the reverends were so happy with what I did then, they called me into their church in Romford. They said, could you like to do one of these in our congregation, because we love the similarities between your faith and ours, and we didn't know any of this. We only know what the media tells us. So I did go, actually. I went the following weekend to St Andrew's Church in Romford and met the whole congregation. They were so happy to see me because they said they never get a Muslim coming to their services, and I took part in the service as well. I'm fine with that. I work in a Church of England school. My children went to a Church of England school. I used to go to all their church services. We need to mix. We need to, show that we...
Absolutely. I think this is the thing. Again, is it a myth, though, that other faiths, including Muslims, tend to stick together to their own faiths and don't want to mix? Because is that a myth? Because we see the media reporting many a time that that there are ghettos, and which is never a good thing, really, is it?
No, it's not. I think the problem we've got is with the older generation, they may not feel comfortable or confident enough to mix with other faiths because they lack the confidence and even
is there a language barrier? Yeah, I was just going to say,
well. So they prefer to mix with their own. I think the other thing is, in some areas like London, there's so many of your own. There's the feeling of, well, why do you need to mix with others when you've got all your own?
You've got the unity, yes. But then that can create a fear with the Christians, and they see that there's a divide.
Yes, and this is where then you get the extremism happening. I personally feel where there's too many of one kind, you don't mix with others, and that's where you don't know any different. The youngsters nowadays who are born and brought up here like myself, we want to mix. In fact, to be quite honest with you, we're more comfortable mixing with people who speak English because that's our first language, and people of our own sort of background. For example, if we speak our own language, we feel a bit uncomfortable because our first language is English, so our accent is different, and we can't, when I speak my own language, half the words are English, and in that way I feel it's more comfortable.
What would your own language, you say your own language, first language English, what would the other language be?
So the official language in my home country is Urdu, but we're from the Punjab, so we can speak fluent Punjabi. So Punjabi, I would say, would be my first language, as in home, at home.
Yes.
And Urdu is my second language. But my first language is English because my dad came here as a student in 1962.
But you were born here, weren't you?
I was
anyway?
born
So
here.
you are English.
English, yes.
Yeah.
And my dad actually very strongly said to us, speak in English. He used to tell us off because he was educated. He wanted us to mix in. And that's, I think, the difference. In the days when my parents came, everybody wanted to mix with the English. There was very few Muslims, so you had to mix.
Yeah.
I remember my next door neighbour coming round for cups of tea, very friendly with my mum. All our road, we used to mix with them. We had to. But I think what's happening in areas where there's too many Muslims is there isn't enough of other faiths anyway.
Yeah, because they move out.
And they've moved out, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of East London, the people from that I knew have all moved out now into Essex. And it's new immigrants who now do not feel they need to mix with other faiths. There's very few other faiths anyway, for example, in London.
I've noticed this in a district of Birmingham that I've travelled through a long time ago in the 80s, and I noticed a lot of it was West Indian, probably stroke Caribbean black, and the next time I was there, which was probably about 8 or so years ago, so a long time after the 80s, and the area had completely changed. It wasn't Afro-black anymore, it was Muslim.
Yes, I think that immigration is very strong in cities. So as people are educated and then do well for themselves,
it does change, doesn't it?
The general tendency is then to move out into the countryside where conditions are better, schools are better, on the whole. And then you get the new influx of immigrants and they always come to the ports. I just, as we speak, did a talk yesterday on the history of our faith in the UK. So we had a Christian speaker and I was the Muslim speaker. And we looked at the history and we talked about ports. In each and every part of the country is where the traders first came.
Yes.
And that's where you get the most immigration, near ports and docks. And then they generally do better and then they move out into country areas and then you get the new influx.
Yeah. OK, we'll talk more on that in a few minutes. We've got a break for traffic and travel. Also, this evening, Sidra Naeem, we're talking about Islam and some of the different faiths. And you've got a son. Is he listening this evening?
He is listening.
Should we say hello to him?
Hello, Muntaha.
Hello. And we were talking about ghettos and the younger generation and difference between the young generation and the older generation with Muslims and mixing with other faiths and that. Presumably what you're teaching, is that that's filtering down to your son and he's got Christian friends and possibly different friends as well, and perhaps some of the barriers aren't there.
Yes, I hope so. I mean, I hope that I'm a really good role model for them, and they are watching what I do. They come along to all the interfaith forums, including my husband and my daughter as well, because I've got one daughter and one son, and all three of them they came last night to the interfaith forum, and they're mixing all the time. They came
so your
to
children go to the forums as well?
They do. They come with me, and the open days in the mosques, they were part of that as well.
Really?
So they saw all of that.
And what do they think of it? How do they interpret it?
I think that they have got the same kind of viewpoint as me, really. I feel they think it's very important and to mix with other faiths. And, we live in England at the end of the day. That's what we need to remember. Yeah. So we have to mix. We work outside, do we not, of our faith? We come along across so many different kinds of people, and they do at school. And when you go to university, it's even more. My daughter's already at university. My son's just starting now. And international students is huge at the moment in universities. You come across so many different cultures.
Do you ever worry about, the stories about the radicalisation in your own children? I mean, we've talked about other children before. Do you ever worry about, them being brainwashed perhaps by these extremists that we keep hearing about?
I don't really. The reason is I've brought them up in such a way to tell them, and they know the religion inside out. So I would hope that if something like that did happen to them, which it can do, they will know exactly the boundaries and they would know their religion enough.
Hopefully they'd come and talk to you about it as well.
Yes.
Which is some of the ones that we keep hearing about. They're not doing that, or even we're hearing that the parents don't know about it or claim not to have known anything about this other side to their siblings' lives.
Yes, I mean, my children have heard me tackling those questions in interfaith forums and mosque open days. So I would say out of all the children I know, I'd think my own children know the best way because they've heard me tackling the questions.
Yeah, perhaps because they got a mother as well that is actually active in fighting against this sort of thing. That possibly goes for them too. Okay, we'll talk to you some more in a few minutes' time. We've got guest Sidra Naeem. We're talking about Islam, and we've been talking about segregation, separation, the differences between the young and the old. And you've got a thick folder of different bits and pieces there. And some of the questions I do believe you were asked at the roadshow that you were at?
Yes, in the mosque open days, I was asked about a lot of questions. I
call it a roadshow. You call it an open day.
Yeah, mosque open day. Lots and lots of questions. All the kinds of questions you're asking me, really. Yes.
And dispelling some of the myths that
yes,
that
and understanding why as well. For example, you asked me about why some Muslims don't mix. Well, the reason is there's a language barrier, a cultural barrier. And like I said, it's more with the new people that are coming over, really. But the older generation, in the days my mum and dad came here, there were very few Muslims. They were well educated. That's the difference as well. Very well educated, very good English. And they could mix with the others, and they encouraged us to. And that's probably why I am the way I am. Because as I grew up, all our next door neighbours were always round. You know, I remember when my younger brother was born and all the neighbours came round to see him, brought presents, everything.
Yeah. So very welcoming.
Yes.
Yeah. How do you feel about the current migrant situation at the moment? Because that does seem to be escalating. It seems to be the latest news we're hearing that France is trying to shift the burden of responsibility onto the UK by waving them through and moving the border to the UK because of Brexit. Mm-hmm. You know, how do you see that situation?
I think that's a government problem, and I feel that the government really needs to put the rules in, and it's not really for us to say anything, because we can say what we like. The government will still do what they feel. And with Brexit, I remember there was a lot of opposition, a lot, because they didn't want, you know, it's all about living all together in harmony and incorporating everyone together. And then yet Brexit did happen, and it was, no matter how many petitions went against it, in the end it's the government that does what they want to do.
Brexit has brought about disharmony in certain areas. I mean, we've heard recently in Harlow of a Polish man murdered in the wake of Brexit, and it feels like the hate crimes are on the increase. Yep. Has this been mentioned at all in your forums and travelling around Essex?
Yes.
Has this subject come up?
I sit on the race hate crime panel, and race hate crime has increased since Brexit happened. Against everyone.
Why is this, do you think?
It's interesting. I mean, the next day after Brexit, quite a lot of children, for example, in schools went up to coloured children and said, when are you leaving? They didn't quite understand it. But it's promoted it, you see.
Yeah.
It was promoted, I think. I think the government was going to go for that anyway. And in a way, it was promoted through newspapers and media as well, you know, that we're losing money, this kind of, you know, certain things were geared up towards it, and I think that increased the race hate crime, you know. But now I think they're suffering because the pound has gone really low in price.
It has.
Because I went to America 22 years ago on my honeymoon in the same place, and I remember clearly there were $4 to £1. And when I went this time, I found everything extremely expensive.
Right.
And the pound was nearly the same as a dollar, and it was hugely expensive.
So you didn't get a lot of dollars for your pounds when
It was awful. I mean, eating out, it was £100 for 4 of us.
Oh, gosh.
And then on top of that, you have to put tax as well. So we were taxed on everything.
Yes, yeah.
It was dead expensive, I found this time. And I think that the pound is really lowered.
Some say it might be just a temporary lull, but others, you know, feel it's going to be a bit of a winter of discontent that's going to go on for some time. Do you feel that the situation's likely to change yourself, or that you've had first hand of going to America now? How was petrol? Did you have a car over there? Because when I last went to the States, petrol was ridiculously cheap.
Yes, we did have a car in the last couple of days, and petrol I wouldn't really know because my husband drove and he put the petrol. But I think it was cheaper than here, definitely.
Yeah, everywhere's cheaper than here.
But it is nearer to the Middle East as well, I suppose,
Yes.
America. So I think there's the petrol has to travel further to come to England, so it may be because of that. It was cheaper than here, I think, the petrol. But everything else was dead expensive, and on top of that, everything was taxed.
Yes.
So just as I worked out something was quite good to buy, I completely forgot about the tax, and I'd get to the till
you
and then
do the figures
and then
you got caught out at the till.
Yeah, and then I'd remember, I didn't add on the tax, and then I'd think again, shall I buy it or not? It was really bad.
Indecision.
Yeah, I think England is much better.
Okay.
For items.
Right.
Definitely. They don't have pound shops there, that's for sure.
No, I suppose you had to have dollar shops, but never mind. Okay, we'll be talking about business in just a few moments' time. Another thing we got to mention is that you are going to do a spot very soon with our radio club. And that's going to be rather interesting because we're going to get a different feel to an interview, I think, when that comes around. So we've got a little promo coming up about what our radio club is in a couple of minutes' time and what you can do if you want to join it. All that, plus we're going to the phones after the traffic and travel. It's Gateway 97.8. This is your studio, your station, our studio, Studio 2, from the heart of Eastgate. It's Drive Time with Roz. And a sound. My guest this evening, Sidra Naeem, and we're talking about, is it Hajj?
Yes, Hajj is pilgrimage.
What is that? So it's a pilgrimage.
It's a pilgrimage to Mecca. It's one of the 5 pillars of Islam, the last pillar. It's a summary, in a way, of all the pillars. So it's a journey to Mecca if you're physically or financially able to make. And it's Abraham. I think I mentioned the story last time that Abraham was asked to sacrifice his son, which is also in the Bible and the Torah. And his son was replaced by a ram, and to thank God for that, he built a big sanctuary in Mecca called the Kaaba, which means cube, meant for the worship of the one God. So millions and millions of people from all over the world gather there in this particular Islamic month.
Have you ever done this pilgrimage?
I have, and it was absolutely amazing. It changed my life spiritually. Absolutely brilliant. I think what was so amazing was there were millions and millions of people from all over the world, different cultures, different colours, different languages, but all there just for one purpose, to worship the same God of everyone.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing. So it's happening at the moment. We just had our Eid on Monday.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And that was the second Eid. Eid means celebration. And that Eid is to celebrate the fact that Abraham's son was saved by, the ram, and we have a lot of meat on that Eid. We eat a lot of lamb, roast lamb.
Roast lamb?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh, yeah, that sounds really nice. And how is it cooked? I have to ask this question. How's it cooked?
You know what? It all depends how you want to do it. You can put it in biryani.
Yes.
You can put the meat in curry. You can have roast lamb, that kind of stuff. It's just to remember that story, really, because this is exactly what Abraham did when his son was saved with the ram. He then sacrificed the ram and then gave the meat out to the poor, and that's what we do as well on this Eid.
Okay.
We send money abroad to poverty-stricken areas where they sacrifice a lamb like he did, any livestock animal, and then the meat is given out to the poor.
I'll tell you, we've never had a conversation about halal meat as well. I know that's another controversial one, isn't it?
Yes, halal is actually, if you think about it, right from the beginning of time. If you think of the way Abraham cut the lamb, it was slit straight, sharp knife at the neck. Oh. But there was a reason for that.
It makes me go all queasy to think about it.
Well, we don't. One of the things in meat which is toxic, is urea. Mm-hmm. And blood has a lot of urea in it.
Right.
So why we slit at the throat is it cuts the carotid artery and the jugular vein,
right,
which are the main veins in the whole body that carry the blood. And when you slit it straight there, all the blood rushes out of the animal with a matter of seconds, and it stops the pain as well. That's another thing which a lot of people think it causes a lot of pain, but it stops the blood flow to the brain and the heart immediately, so they don't feel any pain. And if you look at kosher meat, it's killed in exactly the same way.
Right.
And it's actually written in journals that halal meat or kosher meat is more fresher because more blood has been taken out of it. So it can stay in the fridge for ages, whereas non-halal meat goes off after 2 days because of the blood content in it and the urea.
So, Sidra Naim, my guest this evening, I'm learning a lot tonight about Islam, halal meat and Eid as well. We'll talk some more about this in the next hour of the programme. We've got the news coming up at 6 o'clock, and also we're going to be going to the phones to take a question as well on Islam this evening. This is your station. It's Gateway 97.8. It comes to you from the heart of Eastgate.
Rain or shine, your local Gateway weather.
Well, whether it's Eid or whether it's just a normal Thursday evening, it's lovely outside at the moment. And listening to Drive Time Hour 3 from the heart of Eastgate. My guest this evening, Sidra Naim. We're talking about Islam. And on the phones now, we got Richard, who is joining us now. Hello, Richard. Hello, good evening.
Hello, good evening.
How are you?
I've had a nice day, sunning myself a little bit.
Well, that's good to hear. Hopefully you haven't got burnt, though, outside. You've been listening to the show, have you?
Oh, yes.
And you've been listening to Sidra talking about Islam. You've got a question to ask, I believe.
Yes.
Well, you're through to Sidra now. She can hear you speaking.
Sidra.
Hello, Richard.
Yes, it's a general question, really. Do you think there ever will be peace again in the Middle East? Every time I turn on the TV, there's all this unrest, and it's really awful, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I mean, hopefully there will be. What you must remember is that what is happening in the Middle East is un-Islamic. So it doesn't mean that if bad things are happening in an Islamic country that is what the religion says, because the government... it doesn't mean, for example, in England, that all the laws the government puts in place are Christian. So likewise, all the laws that are put in place or whatever they're doing in the Middle East, it doesn't mean that they are Islamic. So that's the main thing I think that people need to remember. And to a certain extent, politicians, especially in the Middle East, they're quite corrupt. And it's all about money and power. And land, grabbing land and power and money. That's what it's all about, really.
And I also see
land and possessions. And
I guess it's horrible, isn't it, to see all the bombed buildings and the people in the rubble, and you think, is this ever going to get better? Is that what you're thinking, Richard?
Yes, I mean, obviously, both myself and Ros go to church, and we do pray for peace, all the time, I think.
Okay, so which is a good thing to do. I mean, obviously you've got a situation there with President Assad and what Sidra is saying. You've also got the Americans and the Russians with the airstrikes, and it all seems to be at times total confusion. Would that be right, Sidra?
Yes, it is. And we don't really understand ourselves what's going on in the Middle East, because all we know is that Islam says, the actual word Islam means peace, first of all, and the whole religion, there's not a single religion on this land that doesn't promote peace and is all about love and unity. There's not a single religion on this world that will tell you to kill. And in Islam, if you kill one person, it's like killing the whole of mankind. So, what they are doing definitely is not from Islam. It's for their own power and money and land, and they've got their own agenda behind things.
When you watch the news, Richard, do you get depressed seeing it? Do you feel like you want to come away?
Yes, absolutely. It's so destructive, and this is a beautiful planet, and surely there's got to be a solution somewhere down the road.
Well, I don't know what that solution is. I mean, if you ask me off the top of my head, and probably Sidra the same, what is the solution? Really, it's only people getting round a table talking, really, and agreeing some kind of truce. I mean, there's been a truce in Syria, hasn't there, in the last couple of days? Is it holding? I think it's been holding. How long it will last, we shall have to see.
Yes. I mean, I think personally, I think the only way now is for Jesus to come back again, because we believe as Muslims also, like Christians, that Jesus will come back again. And I think that would be a good idea, because that would stop everything, wouldn't it?
Well, that I think, and I mean, in the Christian church that I went to on Sunday, I think they were echoing those words as well, and that was the thing. Well, thank you, Richard. Thanks for joining us on the show this evening. And thanks and Cedra is my guest this evening. An interesting point, though, Richard's had on the show tonight. Will there ever be peace? Who's causing it? Interesting comments from you.
Yeah, that's what my own opinion. But all we can do is pray for peace, and that's our goal, really. And all the Muslims actually that I know, and I know quite a few, they all hate what's happening in the Middle East, and each and every one of them hate the politicians and hate their rules and all the rest. But, even in other countries, we can honestly say a lot of the politicians, their rules are to suit themselves, without taking into consideration other people's feelings, petitions. I remember when the Iraq War happened and millions of people, signed petitions, and there were marches up London to stop the war. But then did it stop? No, because the government...
Tony Blair, who's still being blamed for it now.
Yes, I mean, whatever the government says, that is written in stone, and that's it. They don't listen to anyone else. I feel we, in a certain way, cannot control what is happening out there, and it is a government problem.
Yeah, so it's really, again, we're back to that same subject of governments having to get round a table and actually agreeing something. I think America and Russia, they've both agreed some kind of plan, but will the truce hold? Well, we'll have to wait and see. We've got some other topics to talk about there. We're talking about Hajj, we're talking about Eid. What else have you got there, Cedra?
Well, I'd like to talk about the airport, actually, in America, because that really was upsetting.
Was it? No,
yes,
this is to do with your recent trip.
Yes, the security at the airport.
What, you weren't met by Donald Trump?
No.
He hadn't built a wall.
No, and it's really interesting because I don't think people really liked Donald Trump from what I saw in America.
Really?
Yeah, because there were lots of jokes being cracked. We went to quite a few shows there, comedy shows and things, and there was always bad jokes cracked about Donald Trump, which gave me the sense of a feel that America doesn't like him anyway. So,
really?
Which again comes to the point that politicians...
The feel we're getting, though, via the media tells a different tale, really,
doesn't it? This is the problem. This is, again, stereotype, where we think America is with Donald Trump and is with all his ideas. But again, that's the politician. It doesn't mean that represents the whole of America, does it?
No, exactly. Although the one genuine story that we saw this week on the television was Hillary Clinton stumbling into a black van, having suffered from pneumonia, which she's probably having to take some antibiotics for now, like I had to last month for my rather horrible cold. So, come on, tell us about your bad experience at the airport.
Yes, so everything was
Tell the listeners.
Yeah, everything was absolutely fine in England, but when we got to America, and there was a whole queue of people, everyone from England on that aeroplane, and it was actually all the Muslims. They looked at the surnames, they must have looked at what we looked like, or they knew from our passports. They were all shipped into another area, which was called, it was the second sort of procedure that you go through.
You feared something like this before you went, didn't you? Because you hinted that there might be problems before you went. You were still surprised, though?
I was still surprised, yes, because we're completely innocent. So I must say I was still surprised, even though I did know from other people that happens. And I mean, all three, my husband, me and my daughter were absolutely fine. It's my son, who's the youngster, who they took in, and for 1 whole hour they intimidated him, and it was really bad, horrible questions which he found intimidating, like, do you speak English? Do you speak in any other languages apart from English? Have you been in Libya, Syria, Iraq, Iran or Saudi Arabia in the last 5 years?
Right.
Have you ever been to the United States before? Have you had any military training? And then where were you born? And
How old is your son?
He's only 18, but he looks much younger than 18. So he's
18,
quite small.
Military training. I know that they do start them young out there,
and yet
they?
Then they asked him, do you go to school? So you think, well, how could you have military training if you went to school? And then they said, where were you born? And he said, England. And then they looked at parents, and they said, well, where are your parents born? And he said, England. And then they said, oh, well, what about your grandparents then? Where were they born?
Oh, wow.
So, and then they asked the home address at least 2 to 3 times. So he'd ask the home address, and then after a couple of questions, he'd ask the home address again. So it was like they were really checking.
How did he feel after this?
Horrible. I mean, he didn't like what was happening because it made him feel like a criminal when he wasn't.
Yeah.
But it was all the Muslims, because there was another lady, and that, interestingly, her husband was English.
Right.
And they asked her as well, even though her husband was white British English, she was, I think, a Muslim, but she didn't look it, but she was a Muslim. Are you going to visit anyone while you're here in the United States? Are you going to do any business while you're here? Are you going to be working while you're here in America? Where are you going to be staying? Those kinds of questions. Who paid for your tickets was another question. And then at the end, they made him open up all his suitcase, and that was really embarrassing. Out came his shampoos and his creams. They wanted to know what ingredients were in the creams. And he said, well, I don't know. And then they opened it, took a
Read
sniff.
the label.
Yeah, it was all, that kind of stuff.
Yes.
And then on the way back, it was me, wasn't it, this time?
Oh, same questions.
No, it was very different. What happened was I was wearing a top and it had a bit of glitz on it.
Oh,
so
right.
this lady took me in the corner and she was rubbing some liquid on the shine, and I was just laughing, and I said to her, what are you doing? She said, oh, I'm rubbing acid on the glitter on your shirt, just in case you've got explosives attached to your body. And I just laughed in her face because I thought that was really funny.
Oh, dear. It almost reminds me of the time when I was at Dubai airport in the Middle East and my connecting flight, and I walked through one of those things that detects the metal, and I had a single, like a pair of trousers on, which had this belt detail sewn into them, and it kept setting the alarms off. Every time I walked through one of these things, it set the alarms off, and I got, taken off to a booth somewhere with a Muslim lady who had to check me over.
Okay.
And I said, well, do you want me to take these off or whatever? The belt details built into the trousers, so I can't take the belt off. So
well, it's more advanced than that now because it had full X-ray machine. So you go through and it X-rays inside your body as well, in case you've got something inside your body.
Oh no.
Yeah, so they had full X-ray machines, very advanced, and the security system, it's correct, it's true what people say here. It's very strong there.
Absolutely incredible.
To a certain extent, I feel, yes, it needs to be to stop terrorism, so I agree with that.
Yes.
But what I feel is it's a handful of terrorists, yet millions of Muslims are being then.
Yes, well, this is the downside of it, isn't it? The almost like the obvious effect of it all is it's going to cause issues like this and problems like this that we can't really get away from.
Yeah, that's the problem, because then it's affecting innocent people, isn't it? Millions of innocent people, just thanks to a handful of terrorists that are causing chaos, and they're the ones who get through. I don't know how they get through then if the security is this tough. I really don't understand how they get through.
Well, they often turn out to be the pilots, don't they, of the planes, or worse than that. So we were talking earlier about 9/11, and again the mystery of how some of these pilots actually trained in America. So they could almost say homegrown terrorists there. Okay, well, talk some more in a few minutes. We've got a break for traffic and travel once again. It's Gateway 97.8. My guest, Sidra Naeem. Very interesting conversation. Your station from the heart of Eastgate. Islam. We haven't mentioned yet the bikini ban.
Oh, yes. I think that's sad because I
didn't even know what one was until this.
I wore a burkini when I went on holiday, and it's so comfortable. I wouldn't be able to then go swimming or go to the water parks if there wasn't one.
Well, you can't wear them in France, although I think there's been a little bit of a U-turn on it, hasn't there?
Well, I won't be going to France on holiday in that case. But I think it's sad because when I went to America recently, I saw lots and lots of older ladies, larger ladies, who are fully covered because they don't feel comfortable in wearing a bikini.
I'm buying one tomorrow.
And, generally, if you look at what they're wearing, it is like a burkini because they're wearing leggings with their stuff, for starters, which is only what the burkini is. The burkini is just a normal swimming costume with leggings.
Yeah.
And maybe 3/4 arms. That's all it is. Very comfortable. And we can then go swimming. We can go to the water parks. If they ban the burkini, then there will be a lot of loss in money in some of those water parks. Because a lot of all the Muslim population will not be able to go in any water parks in Tunisia, Morocco, America, everywhere.
You say it covers
Egypt.
the body. Does it cover the face in any way at all? Because it could be...
No, not at all. I just wear my swimming cap as normal, which covers my hair, and the rest, it's a swimming costume with leggings, separate leggings, which go under. And that's all it is. And there's so many English companies out there making millions of money because they have made designer burkinis now and they're being sold like anything, not just to Muslims but to non-Muslim ladies who, like I said, want to cover a bit more of their, their ripples and things.
Yes, a few of those about here in the studio. I'll just drop it onto the top of the table here and you can see it for yourself. It's 27 minutes past 6 o'clock. Talking to Cedra, we've got a few more bits to go through, which we'll do in a few minutes' time. So that's in the soaps. Here we've got my guest, Cedra. Are you a soap fan at all, Cedra? Do you ever watch these things?
I used to as a teenager. I used to watch EastEnders, sometimes The Neighbours, but not anymore. Don't get the time, really.
I know exactly how you feel. And I look at the plots of some of these soaps and they lead far more exciting lives than I ever would.
Yeah, I think it's all, the higher the ratings, the higher the the more shocking the
Shock
programme,
potential,
the more higher the ratings.
Yeah,
so
they seem to play on that now, don't they? So you went to America. We've been talking about your trip and we've been talking about security. 9/11. That was just the other day, and we've been hearing about that. Hillary Clinton seems to be back in action, and the news story tonight, she'll make her first public campaign appearance tonight since collapsing at the 9/11 memorial event. Did you see anything going on for 9/11 when you were over there? You were there just before it, weren't you? Just before the...
Yeah, we were back before 9/11.
Yes.
But lots of things are happening here, which we are doing to try and, make amends and uniting everybody. So we've got a brilliant cricket match happening this Sunday, which is between the Reverends in Chelmsford from Chelmsford Cathedral against Chelmsford Mosque. And that is something which came up in a conversation with the Vice Dean of the Cathedral, who loves cricket. And so does my husband and son. And he said, you know what, for 9/11, why don't we have a cricket match? And everybody's called. The Interfaith Forum are coming.
What brilliant idea.
Yeah, really good idea. And we've got food again at the end, which the Chelmsford Mosque are, everyone's bringing in a dish, all the Muslims, just to show hospitality. And we're holding that. Everybody's welcome, by the way, if you want to come and watch. It's at 2:30 at Willingdale Cricket Ground.
Right, that's in Chelmsford.
Yes, it's between Chelmsford and Ongar.
Right, okay.
And it's this Sunday because last Sunday we couldn't get hold of a cricket ground to hire. But it is because of 9/11 we're holding that. So that's going to be something really good. And it's going to be an annual event, I think, from now onwards.
That's excellent to hear. Anything happening closer to home, to Basildon, or...?
Well, we had the open day just last week on Thursday. Was the open day, and that was because of 9/11, and that was in Chelmsford Mosque. So we've already done the open day in Chelmsford. Apart from that, two big events really. We might even follow the cricket match up with a football match if there's enough interest. We'll have to see.
So, what role do you play in this? Do you cook some of the food? You don't play cricket, do you?
No, I actually organised the cricket match, so it's me who organised it. So the poster was given out, collated all the players, sorted out the food, who's going to bring what, that kind of stuff. But it was actually me who started this.
You're the plotter and the organizer behind these events and everything, bringing all this good to our area, which is always nice to see. And do we have any other events that are coming up apart from that one?
I think the main events have blown over because of Eid, so Eid's gone, and now all the parties.
What's the next big event then on the Muslim calendar, the Islamic calendar?
Well,
a little way off, I expect. You know,
I think it would be a little way off. Ramadan would be the next big thing in the calendar, but there's lots and lots of other things in between. I mean,
what do Muslims do at Christmas? Because obviously Christmas is a Christian celebration.
Yes.
It's still a public holiday for some parts of it. So what would you be doing at Christmas?
Because it's a public holiday, then we end up being at home celebrating and cooking as well, because you know we do have family coming round like you do on all bank holidays. So we would sit down and have a meal. I always give out Christmas cards and Christmas presents to all my non-Muslim friends, and in a way it is celebrated in that sense because you're going with the flow, aren't you?
Exactly, which I guess is what we all want to happen. And the common comments that you hear is, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. When in England, you must speak English, you must do this and you must do that. How do you feel about that?
Yes, I mean, a lot of people also think that we don't believe in Jesus, and we do.
Yeah,
we think he's, really, really respect Jesus, and we believe he's one of the prophets of God, a very major messenger. And like I said earlier, we believe he's going to come again. We are waiting when he comes again. In a way to save the world, if you like. We believe that when he comes, the world will be at peace, and exactly the same saying, heaven will come on earth, we believe, when Jesus comes. It will be like heaven comes onto earth. Be lovely, peaceful and everything. So, it's not that we don't believe in him, so we believe in him. And
Has this been a nice experience for you this evening, being on the show? And will you come back again?
Definitely, I will. I'm enthusiastic and I love coming here.
Excellent.
And I'm sure this is at least my 5th or 6th time here.
I think it is. I know that your first time was with Yvonne, and we mentioned her again, sadly no longer with us, but obviously carrying on in spirit. And obviously we want to keep these regular meetings going, and I do hope we can book another one tonight. And of course, just another mention that you are coming in on a Saturday to be with our radio club and to hear some of their opinions on Islam as well. And that being the younger generation, it's always interesting to get a different feel and a different take. Yes. And I'm sure you'll be asked some very different questions as well.
I mean, I go to lots of secondary schools where we have debates with teenagers, and they are actually quite with it nowadays.
Yeah.
They watch the news, they're into debates, there's debating societies in secondary schools. Went to Wickford Beauchamp School just before the summer holidays. We had a big debate there on Islam, so I'm used to that.
What questions do they ask in the debate there or talk about?
The general ones are Muslims terrorists, also,
So some of the same questions again, though.
Yeah, same questions. All the ones that are in the media, really.
Yeah.
All the ones in the media.
You've got your standard answers now for some of these.
I do, but they do challenge you more. Yeah. Because teenagers, they're not the ones to just accept whatever you say. They challenge you.
So youngsters are more challenging than older people,
definitely,
you would think.
Because with the elders, there's more of this sense of, we must respect and we mustn't offend someone. Whereas with the youngsters, they don't care about offending anyone. They just want to know their answer. And less respect, which is the general trend anyway with all teenagers. So with them, you find them arguing a lot more. So you have to explain yourself a bit more. Sometimes you have to explain things in a different way so they can understand. Because they don't all think the same. And what's interesting is, what I find the hardest, I think, with teenagers is they don't know the past. So with an older person, for example, a grandmother, she would know her own religion really well.
Sure.
She would have gone to church as a child. She would cover more in her days, that kind of stuff. So when you tell them about Islam, they understand it better. But with the youngsters, they haven't lived through that era. So for them, it's really hard to explain because they only know the nowadays. And they've only known Islam as bad. So when you go back in time, they can't relate to it.
Yeah,
So it's
but
more difficult.
what about the Quran? Do they read the Quran and learn from that at all?
I think internet is the biggest source for teenagers.
Yeah.
So if they do read any bits of the Quran, it's the wrong bits and it's all what they read on the internet. But sometimes schools ask me to bring in English translated Qurans, and I just put them on the table, and if they want to take one, they can. And some teenagers do. But there's very few who know about their own religion, very few Christians. I think the latest thing in schools is humanism.
Yes.
Atheists is the latest trend I have seen amongst teenagers, where
Not attaching themselves to any religion whatsoever.
yes, and in that way they can do what they like. There's no boundaries, and they've got no one to answer to. I find that is the easiest with nowadays population.
Excellent. Cedra Naim, my guest this evening on the show. It's been wonderful having you in once again. And like I say, I do hope you'll pop back and see us again very soon for another chat. And the Radio Club, we don't know when that's going to be yet, but keep watching this space and we'll give it a mention when it happens. So have I missed out on anything? Is there anything left to say before we wind up?
I think that's about it, really. I mean, FGM is another very big thing, but I can talk about that next time.
We'll talk about that next time because it's a big topic, and obviously, again, it's been in the news very recently, and it's a very controversial subject. But we're pretty much out of time now. We've got to go to the traffic and travel in just a few moments' time. But first,